Hi, this is Ed in San Diego, and welcome to Global TV Talk Show. In just a few minutes, we're going to welcome our very special guest from the New York area, Stephen McGarry. Stephen is, as you know, I think you should know, senior global mobility and human resource professional for many years. Has been honored and recognized as a top 100 global mobility professional. He's vice chair of the ERC Foundation for Workforce Mobility, an accomplished public speaker. He's an expert, a recognized expert in tax and immigration compliance. In general, Stephen McGarry is a very experienced global mobility executive, and he says he believes a mobility program should continue to grow and change as the environment and conditions continually are changing, as we see that right now, don't we? So Stephen's going to have a lot to say on this topic. He also says mobility policy and corporate programs should continue to transform and grow as the company itself grows and changes. He says that's one of his passions. He says the better the program, the better for the company, the better for the employee experience. That's the trifecta, right? Do you know companies who are not doing that? Stephen has worked hard to make sure that that happens in WPP, one of the world's largest advertising and marketing companies, for many years. Stephen says each employee he has dealt with is different than the ones before, and each have their own set of personal circumstances that need to be adhered to. Each person he deals with, Stephen says, whether they be a transferee or a corporate HR client, makes the job, his job, different each day. That takes a lot of energy. It takes a lot of care. It's not a duty to care, it's a want to care, and Stephen McGarry has exhibited that for as long as I've known him, many years. So Stephen also says he revels, he loves to make sure that the company's employees are properly cared for during what he says is one of the most stressful times in a personal life, moving, relocating. Can you imagine doing that with a family? Moving people is the basis of the job, and making them happy is what we need to do. Let's welcome Stephen McGarry. Hello, Gary.
No kidding, it's working.
It's welcome. I'm glad to have you. And we are recording right now and awaiting the arrival of our guest, Stephen McGarry from the New York area.
Excellent. Thank you
And
for
he should be
asking me to join.
Yeah, well, I think you're going to enjoy this. I understand you're a really busy guy. So Gary Saenger and I have known each other for almost 3 years now, and he's been extremely active, and I'm really thankful for him being a member of Global Press Club. More so, he is a top tier, recognized as top tier in his industry, which is retained executive search. Gary, why don't you quickly introduce yourself? Much better than I just did.
Well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
It's good to be here. I think it's several more years than 3 years that we've known each other, frankly. I'm a headhunter. I do retained executive search. I'm located here in the Los Angeles area. We do regional, national, and sometimes global work. And so we partner with corporate clients in helping them fill out their executive teams, their senior management teams.
Yeah, okay. Welcome, Stephen McGarry from the New York area. Can you hear me?
I certainly can, Ed.
And welcome. And here's my friend Gary Saenger, who is a top tier retained executive search operator for many years. Stephen, please meet Gary. Stephen.
Gary, it's a pleasure.
Pleasure. Nice to see you. Are you
You
through
as
with
well.
the smoke in New York City?
You know, that was probably one of the strangest things I've ever experienced in my life, to the point where I would walk outside and look down the street, and it was very difficult to see anything. I was in the city that Tuesday night before it got really bad. I was in Little Italy, having dinner with some people, and usually from that spot you'd get this glorious, spectacular view of the Empire State Building all lit up.
Yep.
And all you could see was a faint outline with little flashes of light every once in a while.
Boy, that is really weird. And I show these beautiful pictures of Manhattan in relation to our June 28 Global New York event. So Gary is in LA and I'm in San Diego. Gary, your background, just so the audience who's now worldwide and watching this thing, is to work with very large companies in the 6 and 7 figure category. Do I have that right?
You do. By the way, as you were talking about Manhattan and smoke at the same time, I have the pleasure of some very close friends that have a home in Alaska. And so I go there for a week or two to catch, not just fish, catch salmon and halibut and the like.
Oh, that's right. I remember you went there last summer.
Yeah, and I was planning that. And so I'm thinking, gosh, if that wind shifts, then it goes up into Alaska, which would be bad. So anyway, ironic, as to some area, it's bad. The original part of me is farm kid from Idaho. And I've been in the executive search business since 1997. I founded Saenger Associates there. There are 8 of us. That's all we do is retained executive search. And so we're that proverbial headhunter that works for small, medium, and sometimes large companies to help fill out their senior management and executive teams.
So Gary has told me in the past, because he's been on our program 15 times or so. So he worked for American Hospital Supply, which is Baxter. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was American Hospital Supply a long time ago was a victim of a hostile takeover by Baxter. We hated each other. They put it together for 10 years, then spun it back out. And today you would know them as Cardinal Health. So I grew up in the big companies of then American Hospital Supply, Citibank, and Security Pacific, which has long since been acquired by Bank of America.
Yeah, that's downtown.
I'm
LA.
a recovering HR guy is what it amounts to.
So Stephen McGarry and I have known each other for 20 years at least, through the machinations of the global mobility industry, always finding a corner to have a beer and look at people walk by the convention area. But he's with WPP for forever, and now is available. So the world of global mobility, in other words, corporate global talent, development, acquisition, training, comp and ben, deployment, retention, next assignment, all that's changing, isn't it?
Yes, it is changing. And it actually started changing prior to the pandemic. I'd say the changes were starting years before that, probably a decade before, it probably in the 2010 area, where a lot of people I know in similar positions where we were talking about how the traditional expatriate kind of program that we used to have is going away. And a lot of what we were doing when we were moving people overseas was basically a local to local package. No longer was somebody going over for 3 years and then coming back to their home position, staying on home payroll, getting housing allowances, getting cost of living allowances, getting tax equalization, and all of that. That was starting to get kind of phased away. And one of the reasons why is because the jobs were local now. The jobs weren't, you need to go there to do this, to train somebody. It was basically, your job is now going to be in Singapore or London or Johannesburg or Doha or wherever the situation may be. That's where the people went to. Now, were people giving allowances where needed? Yes, of course. You know, one of the places where allowances will always come into effect, no matter how we look at a quote unquote expatriate assignment. But when somebody moves overseas, and if they have children, my company used to, we would still offer education, because we want the children to be able to be educated properly in their native tongue language.
And that's really expensive, isn't it?
Depending on where you go, it can be very, very expensive. There is no doubt. There is no doubt.
But happy wife means happy life of an expat.
Well, happy spouse, happy partner makes
Yeah.
makes the employee much happier. There's no doubt about it. Happy children also help with that. Yeah, but the way that we were moving people before the pandemic hit, and then once the pandemic hit, there wasn't a lot of movement. It has started to increase again. Our friends in the van lines will tell us both, domestically in the US, it's starting to tick up, and internationally it's starting to tick up. People are going back to the offices. As they're going back to the offices, they realize that, they need to have those people there in the offices. You can't be doing your job from hundreds or thousands of miles away from where your team is. So they're moving people to be where they're supposed to be.
Yeah. I love remote, but I miss being in front of people. We just did our meeting in London. Our first live meeting in 3.5 years was in London, and HSBC on Canary Wharf hosted us, thankfully, and we filled the room, and we also had a video component to that, and it went well, and I realized that I missed it, although I've produced over 600 programs on Zoom in 3.5 years. I'm itching to get back out, but it has to be done just right this time, rather than lose money on these things.
Yeah.
I need to find sponsors, and so thankfully HSBC has agreed to do it again in September. So I'll be back.
Yeah. I think people are realizing the need to be with their teams. Part of working is the social part of it as well, is getting to know the people that you're working with. When you are in a team environment, and the advertising, marketing, communication world, which I've been part of for over a quarter of a century, that is all team driven. There are very few, silo kind of jobs, whether you're in an agency or whether you're in the corporate center. And you need to be around the people that you're working with. You need to be able to, look over to the person next to you, ask a question, roll back to the person behind you, say, hey, let's get out of here for a few minutes, take a walk, and, grab a dog on the corner, hot dog on the corner, which is a very popular thing to do in New York City. But yeah,
Always good. Always good.
yeah.
There's no knockoffs. It's the real thing.
The DWDs, the dirty water dogs. There's nothing like them. So yeah, it's I think being back in the office is going to further change the way that
now that used to be the water cooler, but now you go out for a dog.
Yeah. Sometimes you just got to get out of the office, even if it's just, I mean, one of the great things about working in New York is that it is so easy just to walk out of your building and walk in any direction for 15 minutes and literally not see the same thing you saw the last 5 times you did it.
Let me ask you a question about on this topic of the values. I'm not pontificating values. I'm just a happy TV talk show host, but the value of an international assignment today is, for the right company, it's a great thing and great value. But from your point of view as a senior leader within that space for a huge multinational organization, Okay, so wear that hat for a second. What's the value to WPP or in any other major company of having someone go on an international assignment? In reality, what is the value to the company? And then I want to ask you to define the value to the assignee themselves. To me, what are you going to send me there for and spend $1 million? What do you expect?
Well, the value to the company is very simple. It's having the right talent in the right place. Especially when you're looking at client facing positions. You want to have the right person in front of the client when the client wants them there or where you think they need to be. It is having the right talent in the right place at the right time. That is going to make the agency, the region, the office, whatever the situation may be, the reason why that person is going to that location, is going to make that area run so much better to have the right person there. That is the value to the company. There is no doubt about it. It is the right person in the right place and at the right time. You don't, and then the reason I say at the right time is you don't want to put the wrong person in that position and have them working there for a year or 2 years and realize it was a mistake and then have to go back and get the right person because you didn't want to spend that money to begin with. Because
So in the selection process, if I may jump in,
yeah,
the selection process of that right person is, tell me, and you're talking to the audience out there, which is multinational, 100 countries, but how does a large company, prepare me to go on assignment rather than here's a ticket, be there on Monday?
I would say that almost every company will have a different way of doing it. I mean, what the person needs to do to be able to go on an assignment. And if you're thinking about it, whether you're asking somebody to move from, Dallas to Memphis, or you're asking somebody to move from San Diego to Singapore, it's kind of very similar in the fact that you want to make sure that the person has all the knowledge that they're going to need to be able to do the job that they're going to need to be able to do. You want the person to be able to land wherever they might be landing and be able to do the job right away. That that is the reason you're sending them there, to do the job. So
And
you want to give
wouldn't that become a virtual assignment first and then land
it
already
is
having a relationship?
it can be some virtual as far as meeting the teams, meeting the clients, meeting the people around. Yes. You can't, I mean, some people might call it a virtual assignment. Some might call it just extended. It might go on a business trip to do it. There are different ways to do it, but what you need to do is you need to be able to get that person educated enough to be able to do their job once they land. Now, the other part of it is the actual physical movement of that person, and that in itself is what the crux of the global mobility and relocation departments have been for years and years and years, getting that employee and their family from point A to point Z with the littlest disruption in both personal and professional life. That is what the basis of our job has always been. Secondarily, it has been compliance. Make sure it's all done legally. It is that, so it is our responsibility to make sure that person gets over there with as little disruption as possible. How is that done? That's done a lot of times through a really good vendor network, making sure you have the right people helping the people in that location. Because if you have the right people who can talk to the people in the location, it makes it a lot easier. There are vendors that are all over the world that can help with almost anything, but having somebody doing area orientation that actually lives in Singapore, if you're going to Singapore, is a lot better than having somebody that is sitting in New York or London or Sydney trying to give you a virtual orientation when they don't live in the city itself. So it's having the right partners in the locations where your people have to go to make sure that the family, the employee and family, can get settled as well.
To what extent do you rely on the vendor to get the family up to speed?
Oh, I have always considered my vendors to be an extension of my department. It is that simple. It is that simple. I mean, I would only contract vendors that I trusted implicitly, that I would allow to move my CEO, which I have had a vendor move my former CEO a few times. I have that would move my family, that would move myself. They're the people I trust. Would I pay a little more in certain locations? Of course, but you know what? You pay for the service you get. How much more is it? It's not a lot. You're talking maybe hundreds of dollars. And I see all the viability of spending a few $100s to make sure that somebody is actually going to be able to get settled and get their job done and make sure their family is happy and settled as well.
Gary, in your retained executive search, you've shared the story on our broadcast previously about taking a six-figure exec out of the Midwest where they have a nice house, white clapboard, with a porch and a garden and a long driveway, and bringing them into LA. And
forgot about the cornfields that are out front.
Field of Dreams, right? Okay, so this is all very familiar because your findings in your search, people are here, there, and everywhere, and yet there's a cultural thing, there's a cost of living mix, and that's a mess. So I'm going to stop talking, Gary. Why don't you give us your insight?
Well, the story on this particular example is young couple, 2 kids, I think 8 and below, and they're in the Midwest, and they want to come to California, but they don't have the downstroke for coming from a B- C level cost of living to an A or AA cost of living here in Los Angeles. And you got housing that's at least double to 3 times here. And we were able to work through it from the standpoint of renting, extra money from the relocation package. They rent for a couple of years, keep their home in the Midwest, rent it out, plan to rent here for a couple of years and then buy. And they've done this 3 or 4 other times. So they have the financial view of what they want to have in their portfolio. The second part was meet them at the airplane and take they and their kids directly to the beach. So something simple like that. Likewise, we had a vendor, this lady, somebody I've known for a long time, so I would trust her with my own family as it relates to relocation. Go to a half a dozen houses, look at where they want to be. What's the first thing the family's going to want? Obviously, 99 times out of 100, safe location and education. Gave them a couple choices. They chose one. And you had that vendor, that lady that's screening as a mom, as a family member, as a professional to go get the right choice on that. And so with as little interruption as you can, because his job starts the next weekend or the next week, he's traveling quite a lot. Mom, who is also a professional and has a job, who was working at virtually, so kept the same employer. That's another complication that oftentimes get these things really messed up, that the trailing spouse can be the bigger wage earner or lesser, but yet if you're going to lose that. So sometimes in our business, this is with a couple $1 billion privately held manufacturing company whom we've had the pleasure of working with for 20 plus years. We know the culture, we know how they take care of their people. They also get mentors and coaches within the company to help the person coming into the organization. So you get that integration. So you're a value add and you're part of the team.
So Steve, this sounds familiar, of course. You've moved people all over the world.
Yes, I have. Just talking about different houses and different cost of livings. I do have a story to bring to light. It was something that happened years ago, but it will never ever leave my memory. I had somebody moving from Marin County to London, and he worked in San Francisco, and he had a 6,000 square foot house on about 10 acres of land in Marin. And you can imagine what the house looked like, and you can imagine what the property looked like. And he came back from his home finding trip in London, and he said, I can't find anything comparable to my house in London.
Well, that's a surprise, isn't it?
I told him, I said, you know what? I said, I think there's only one house in London that would actually be comparable, and the Queen's not moving.
Out of Windsor. Yeah.
So yeah, he did find that amusing, and he found a nice townhouse in South Kensington, which is a big difference from what he had. But I mean, when you were talking about differences in housing and things of that sort, that story once again came back to the forefront of my mind.
Stephen, I have to share this story too. This is pre-kids, and we're moving from Chicago on a promotion here to Los Angeles. And we're working with this nice couple who is helping us with what we're trying to find in the way of homes to go look at. And that was at the time when multiple offers for all houses were happening. And so the guy of the couple here said, well, what's your budget? What are you looking forward to do? And I told him, and with the requirements of what we wanted for dirt, for view, for schools and size of house, he said, you know, I think we're a zero off. But the quick focus on what's reality. I also didn't have 45 straight days of the damn temperature being below zero. I didn't have the wind chill factor of 78 below zero. So what I have and what I need to have somewhere else is really ridiculous, right? If you go somewhere else to try to find what you have now, go there for what it has.
Yeah.
Go there for what it will provide you as an experience, and getting to reality quickly. You know, what's the budget? What's the commute times? What are the schools? It's really a complex puzzle, and I suggest you go after the big items first to make sure they fit, and then you can get into the weeds and make the details happen.
Yeah.
So how big, that is a life lesson, how big is a zero? Huge.
Well, if it's 100 grand or $1 million, or if it's $1 million and it's 10 million, to me, it's substantial.
Stephen, let's talk a little bit about you and your current situation, to the extent you wish, and you could redirect me anywhere if you want me to stop talking. So, are you looking to get into a smaller business, or are you looking to get into Tesla or somebody like that?
I am just looking for what will be the next phase for me. I'm not sure what that's going to be. I've done the corporate world. I've actually done the relocation management world as well. Do I want to be in a large corporation again? If it's the right job, I have no problem doing it. Do I want to be in a smaller company? If it's the right job, I have no problem doing it. Do I want to go to an RMC? Once again, if it's the right job, I have no problem doing it.
And would you like to climb Mount Everest with Andy Ellerman?
No, I would not.
He does strange expeditions, but not like going underwater looking at the Titanic. No.
Well, yeah, when there are more people that have actually stepped foot on the moon that have been that deep into the oceans, you know that's probably something you should think twice about doing.
Yeah. So what do you think of that? This is off the wall, but it's from my head. About comparing your venture. I mean, you've been ensconced in a mega company at the top level for a very long time, and everybody seeks your advice. And what are you going to do to make yourself feel good in your next adventure?
One of the reasons that I've done what I've done is that I get satisfaction in my job by helping others. And and when I mean helping others, I'm not only talking about the people that I am moving for the company itself. That is what the job is. It is helping them move from point A to point Z with the least disruption to the family and professional life. But it's also helping the HRBPs do their job. It's also helping the tax group with what they need. It's also helping the compensation group. It's also helping the benefits group. It's also helping the senior management with what they
So
need.
bringing
It's
all the stakeholders
it's
together.
it's bringing them all together. It is, one of the things that when you're talking about a corporation as large as that I work for, it that it's relationship building. The whole thing is about relationship
And
building.
trust.
And well, that's the reason why, is because no one is going to use your services if they don't trust you. So I have spent a literal lifetime at that company building relationships with the HRBPs and the finance directors and the CEOs and the CFOs and the chief operating officers and everybody else, to the point where they knew that if they came to me, they would get a honest answer. Might not be the quickest answer. And one of the reasons why is because I always did my research to make sure that whatever I was giving them was completely correct. But they always knew that they would get an honest answer from me. I wasn't going to tell anybody anything that was not completely and totally true and honest, and most importantly, compliant. I have said numerous times, I don't want to be an SOB, but I cannot give you advice that's going to say that you're breaking the law or your employee's breaking the law or your company is breaking the law. So there was a level of trust there. So it really was a matter of it. And, not only that, it's also helping my team. It's making sure my team can actually grow and learn and advance throughout the mobility world or the HR world or whatever world they want to. So where do I get the most joy in my job? It's actually helping people. It really, really is.
Each family is different. Each situation is different.
I can move 1,000 people a year, and I've got 1,000 different situations.
So the impact of the pandemic on the mobility services industry, which is worldwide,
Yeah.
and multi-tiered, and I have a question about what do you think is going to happen to the global talent mobility industry as a result of AI?
AI, I guess I mean, there's no guessing. It is the way of the future, but it's the way in the future, I think, in certain aspects. But I really do think that you can't put AI in place of having human contact with somebody who has to listen to what somebody is saying, listen to the inflection in their voices, listen to the tone of their voice, read what their face is telling you as well. Because what somebody might be saying verbally and what they're telling you in the nonverbal aspects can be different. And and one of the things that we have to do as mobility professionals, as talent and global mobility professionals, is be able to read that and be able to say, okay, I understand what you're saying, but I think you've got some trepidation there. Or how about we try doing this? AI will never be able to do that. AI can never do that. And
Even using Zoom.
well, using Zoom I mean, this is fine, but you're not going to ask a bot to be able to talk to somebody about what's going to happen over the next 6 weeks during their move, because you can do it during Zoom. I could talk to Gary, I could talk to Ed, and I could let them know what's happening, but I can see in their face what they're actually thinking as I'm talking to them, where a bot can't do that.
Right. So let's just say that the spouse or partner, their career has been disrupted, and let's say it's female. And so they have their own life that's being disrupted in advance of a move. And they may have resentments that they've been not being deceitful, but hiding their anger or disappointment, and that's going to impact the expat transferee and performance, perhaps. And how would a manager, a leader such as yourself, cut through the BS and talk turkey, talk reality, or get them to talk reality to you so you could be a better doer for them and the company?
It's difficult to get into the personal lives of the employees and their families. You can't delve whether it is because you can see that they don't want it, or by law, you really can't ask some questions itself.
Mhm.
I will honestly tell you, have I seen families and marriages fall apart because of assignments? Yeah, I have. There's no doubt about it. The reason why is the spouse either did not want to go and had to go,
Right.
or once the spouse got there, they realized that they did not want to stay here, and the employee was like, well, I'm staying here. So have I seen that? Yes, I have. Will it continue to happen? It definitely will. Is there any way for us in the corporate center, in the corporate world, to be able to stem that in any way, shape, or form? Once again, it is very difficult to get inside somebody's house to be able to see what's happening behind the walls of somebody's own house. If you have somebody where, as you're having a conversation, if I have, an employee and their spouse or partner on a call like this, and I can see that the spouse partner is a little has trepidation about the whole thing based on some of the questions that are actually being asked. What I will do, and what I have done in the past, is I've tried to focus on the spouse or partner's questions more than the employee's questions. Just try to let them know that we will do everything that we can in our power and ability to make this as smooth as possible. There are certain times where, employees will come back and say, I don't think they want to do it. And I'll say, you're right. They do not want to do it. After having conversations with some employees, have they said, I'm not going to go? Yeah, that's happened too. They've realized that their family is more important than the new job. But it's tough to get inside somebody's house. All you can do is counsel them to the best of your knowledge. And the counseling is just based on the package somebody is getting and what to be able to help them out.
I'm not looking to find out any secrets, and again, I
Sure
welcome.
you are, Ed. Come on. Your curiosity is big time.
Yeah, but I'm not looking to break news here. We're looking to explain the realities of life today, and you're our victim today, Stephen. So,
I do not feel like a victim, believe me.
Oh, good. So, what about down the hall in C-suite where you lived? Historically, the C-suite didn't understand or didn't care about what goes on in mobility, and it was always off there. But you took pride in bringing the issues into the C-suite, because C-suite are the ones not only paying for things, but also they also have been transferred or will be, and they're going to rely on you for the expertise.
Yeah, and honestly, that is true. I have moved quite a few people at the company with a chief in their title, chief executives, chief creative officers, chief financial officers,
Country
chief
managers or
people
whatever.
officers, country managers.
Right.
I have moved numerous people with chief in their title. Yeah, and then that was all going back to the relationship building it is. Do they understand what happens within the world of mobility? For the most part, not anymore. They don't. It is still a financial world. Even though our human resources, people services departments will say it's all about the employee experience, it's about the employee experience up to a certain dollar amount, certain pound amount, certain yen amount, whatever the currency may be. And then they say, well, we don't want to give them an experience of much more than that. So one of the things that's happened, especially in the last year, and it's not only me, it's been with a lot of my colleagues as well, is we're fighting the financial aspects of moving.
It's expensive, right?
Well, due to the pandemic, and there's almost every aspect of the relocation process, the cost of absolutely skyrocketed. Moving somebody, the costs were they're coming down a little bit, but they were up exponentially because the cost of everything went up. The cost of the materials, the cost of the labor, the cost of the transport, the cost of, getting something onto a container ship, the cost of, just driving the stuff from Lynbrook, New Jersey to the port of Newark went up. So everything went up. The cost of temporary living went up because there were so many landlords that don't want to give houses to temporary living companies anymore because they lost a lot of money when all those companies went under. The cost of everything has gone up. So, the companies are like, okay, we've got to start limiting it. And, it's completely understandable. But instead of just, my personal point of view is, instead of just saying you have this much, I think companies should actually be, and this is going back to your point, Ed, is that the C-suite doesn't understand it, is that they should be working with their mobility group saying, this is what we want to spend. What can we get for the most value for this person if we're trying to put a hard cap or a trying to limit it to about this amount of money?
So much of the cost historically has been, I'll be just brief in a second, Gary, is in the shipment of household goods. And there's people who we all know and love in that industry, and this is no means a downer, but life is life. But just the policy could be, we're not paying for shipping your household goods, put them in storage, we'll pay for that.
Well, if you're talking about an expatriate assignment for 3 years, it would probably cost you more to put it into storage than to ship it over and come back.
Reality. Yeah, Gary.
And my point of view, Gary, I'm sorry, I'm just going to give Ed my point of view on that, is that it's very difficult to go to a person and say, you're 45 years old, you've spent the last 20 years collecting everything that's in your house, and now we're going to tell you to get rid of all of it, and we're not going to and start over once you get to Shanghai or Singapore or Dubai or whatever the situation may be.
It's rough. Yeah.
It's rough. It is. Gary, sorry to interrupt you.
No, not at all. I was going to put the tagline or the analogy. This has an awful lot to do with search. You've got a company, let's say it's a $100 million company, and you got a general manager's role, and you're trying to have him influence that 100 million by 10 or 20%. And many times we get bogged down with a few $100 here, a few $1,000 there, and we lose sight of that 10 or 20 million that he or she could impact on the business. And so that person, let's say it's the gentleman, and he has a trailing spouse with some kids, and you're not going to make the house work. You're not going to make the education work. You're not going to do temporary residence for a few extra months, or you're not going to do A or B or C or D. You're risking that 10 to 20 million. So the progressive companies, you go back to the big picture, what's their culture? What do they care about? How do they take care of their team? How do they treat their customers? How do they make a deal happen to get that executive moved into that new role, whether it's an international assignment or whether it's going from Salt Lake City to Tampa? Somehow or another, if I'm going from Salt Lake City to San Francisco, I probably have a 2 or 3x difference on the real estate.
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm not going to deal with that, you're not going to make a deal. Or in these times, I think we blame COVID for far too much. COVID is the new normal from the last 3 or 4 years. And so as companies are sorting out, look, you got to be here X number of days per week or per month. And whether we help with that transition or we have you move or you don't take the job. I got 2 examples from yesterday. A serial entrepreneur CEO that I've done work for in the last 2 companies. Now he's in an AI technology company, been around a handful of years, 500 people. And just yesterday texted and said, look, I'd like to hire my new head of HR. And he or she's going to have to be on the road at least half the time. My 1 base is here in the Los Angeles area. My 1A base is in Armenia. And I have 10 other countries that I'm in. I want an exec that can put the stamp on all of these. I want to pay X. I want to do Y on bonus, and I want to do Z in terms of stock options. I don't want to move them. I can't move somebody from Des Moines to LA, and think that I can make that happen. Those situations happen all the time. And so when the nickels and dimes cloud out the millions, usually deals don't happen. But when you have an executive or an HR partner that sees the big picture, they work that through. They work that through. If here's another 50 or 100 in a sign-on, you handle it. I don't want to deal with the details. Stay with us a year, otherwise you pay us back. Those are some of the realities, right? Those are some of the realities of how you make that happen. You got a kid that's a junior or senior in high school. There may have to be a year when he or she wants to graduate from that school before the full move can happen. I think you probably deal with the same issues I do. When it's relocation, it's 5 to 10x of complexity. And if when they're out there looking at homes, your vendor that's helping them go out and look around will tell you on the record or off the record, hey, this isn't going to work. The trailing spouse or the principal doesn't want to go there because, we had a deal that almost didn't happen because that 3-4-year-old kid had to get preschool, not preschool. I'm dating myself here.
Kindergarten.
Early
education.
education.
Early education.
That's it.
Early education.
And if they can't get in there, they're not going to make the deal. Well, our vendor had grandkids that were in there and top of the list and made it happen. I think the analogy's working the same issues.
Well, Gary, it is. And quite honestly, as you said, it works at, half of the people I moved, for the most part, were new hires. They were new joiners. Only about half of what the people I actually moved at a good portion of time were existing employees. So yes, our talent acquisition team and our human resource business partners and our chief people officers, they're the ones who actually had to do all of that negotiation that you're talking about with the outside search firms and a lot of times the employee itself, but with those outside search firms trying to make this all happen, and then they come to me.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
Well, if we do this, what's it going to cost? If we do this, what's it going to cost? If we do this, what's it going to cost? And those, that once again, I go back to, no matter what anybody says, it's still, it is still comes down to a financial decision. How much are you willing to pay? And what I've always said, and is that sometimes, you might have an organization that, depending on what their situation may be at any point in time, they're only looking at quarter by quarter instead of looking long term.
Yep,
we have to make our numbers for the street this quarter.
Yeah,
And
I hear you.
That's all they're looking at. Yep.
And many times that candidate that's looking to join another company might be doing it for the wrong reasons. He might be doing it for the selfish reason of leveraging himself for a raise or a promotion within what he has now. So you and I and Ed, if we're on a Zoom with that person or out to dinner having drinks or eating one of those dogs on the corner in Manhattan, somehow or another, we're going to understand whether that's legit or not. Somehow or another, if it's a good deal for the person and for the company. So I get two winners. I'm only getting one winner usually. The dread of it is somebody takes it, doesn't last the year or two for our guarantee, and we have to do it over. Company loses, the individual loses, and I have to do it again, and nobody's happy. We don't want to do that.
And probably the customers lose.
Well, the customer for sure. Absolutely. Yeah. They lose big time.
But that goes back, Gary, to one of the first questions that asked me about, why do companies want to move people to different locations? It's a matter of, you have to make sure that you have the right talent in the right place at the right time.
Exactly. And
the
results.
Yeah.
The results they're looking for.
In the right job. The right job.
Yeah. The old bus analogy as far as getting the right people on it and getting them in the right seats.
Okay, so does it matter where the budget is? Is it in corporate or is it in the host location?
That would be set company by company. Usually what would happen in my discussions with my colleagues is whoever is receiving the benefit of the employee is where the budget would actually be sitting. Now, there might be somebody who is a global employee and their benefit gets spread around the world, but they're being paid out of Dubai. So, where is that cost going to sit? Well, the cost would probably be charged to Dubai, and then the Dubai office would charge it out based on where this person's responsibilities are around the world. Um, but we've always taken the point of view is that whatever, and the point of view that is probably historically been in the mobility arena and the expatriate arena previous to that, is that whoever is actually getting the benefit of the employee is the one that would actually be absorbing the cost and benefiting from the revenue.
May I ask, and you again just push it off if the wrong question for this venue. How much is it in reality? How much is the risk to the employee to go on an assignment? Meaning that, let's just say I'm the employee and I wanted to go on an assignment, and my direct leader, manager, is supportive of it, and he got others in the C-suite to say, hey, I think Ed should be the one to do it. And then the C-suite doesn't like my boss and gets rid of him or her. And then I'm out there dangling and with a large expense and risk. What happens to me as the assignee in a situation like that?
Honestly, a lot of times, I mean, and has that happened? Of course that's happened. As I've seen it happen, yes. Have I had people call me and say, what now? And it's basically keep your head below the parapet and keep you in your job. That's the bottom line. If you're going to do your job, you're going to do your job. As long as you're bringing in the benefit to the company, it's really not something that you should probably worry about.
So in
There are
this
people.
case, the talent mobility leader, is perfectly aligned and in sync with the C-suite and other stakeholders.
Yeah, you just if you're there and you were sent there to do the job and you're doing your job, it's not something that you should most likely have to worry about. It's that simple.
Yeah.
Now, have I had employees come back and say, my boss is no longer here. How can I get back? Yes, I certainly have. I certainly have. And then you counsel them on what the company policy is, whether it was the corporate center policy or was it the operating company policy on what they would need to do to be able to get back to their home country or get to the next phase. And their next phase might have been in a different country. But yes, definitely. Yeah, I mean that has happened. Have I seen somebody on assignment once their boss left be severed because somebody didn't like their boss? No, I have never seen that. I have not.
Thank you for being my guest on Global TV. I hope you found it useful. Gary, thank you. Do you want to sum up, Gary, about any tips or any looking at, well, in today's newspaper, on the headlines, a newspaper I read online, but Ford Motor and made a deal with a South Korean chip to make batteries or something in Kentucky, and there's billions of dollars coming in. And then the Taiwan Semiconductor company is spending $4 billion in Phoenix, building up U.S. capacity. And Tesla and GM are moving together to consolidate the electricity charging centers. There's huge changes going on, and it's almost below the radar. Stephen, doesn't this relate to a positive outlook for an expanding global talent resource and the need to have them relocate?
Yes, it does. I mean, when you're talking about, building, processing centers or whatever the situation may be in different areas of the country, there is no doubt that they're going to need the talent to be there to be able to train and manage the people that are going to be hired locally. Now, if people are coming from, Korea or wherever they may be, then would it be an expatriate assignment? It very well may be a traditional expatriate assignment based out of Korea. They very well may say, we're just moving you to Phoenix, Arizona. And, that's where you will be until your next assignment comes about or until we bring you back to Korea, South Korea. So as far as, the Tesla and GM situation goes, I think there will be some synergies in there, whether you might see some cross-pollination between the two companies, putting people, between the Tesla headquarters in Detroit. There's no doubt that that would have to happen. So yeah, I think there is definitely possibility that for those companies you're going to see their volume increase on both short-term and permanent assignments.
To close, Ed, the relationships world, it occurs to me, as you just described, two country relationships with companies within them. Aren't we also thinking about the same situation when you're an expat, your boss gets taken out or leaves? Shouldn't you have the breadth of relationships so you're not solely dependent on just that boss? As we get a customer, as we get a client, it shouldn't be just the relationship with just that one executive. As you broaden that, as you have your career and you're looking at where you're going to go and suddenly your product line or your business is out of vogue. I mean, we're all in risk, whether we're in Tokyo or whether we're here in Denver somewhere. So the relationships and breadth thereof, how did those alliances you just talked about happen? They weren't done in a vacuum. So I just would be a proponent that relationships ought to be key on how you do business, whether it's for your career or it's for your company.
And Gary, I concur. Our business, whether it is me internally or me with my vendors or the mobility industry in general, which Ed knows very well, it is all about relationships.
Of course.
All about relationships. And honestly, I can tell you over the last month, all I can tell you is that I use the term, people showing the love. That one of theirs is in trouble and everybody rallies around.
There you
And
go.
that is because of the relationships, you build over the years in this industry. There's no doubt about it. People say it's a small industry. The ERC, the association, has thousands of people in it. I think at our last meeting in Vegas, we had 1,600 people show up. And that's that's not even, I think, a quarter of the people that are actually registered within the association itself. But it goes out much farther than that, as far as who everybody works with. It is all relationship building.
Thank you for being our guest on Global TV, both of you, and please come back, do it again.
Anytime, Ed. I really appreciate it. Thank you.
This
Pleasure. Stephen, good to see you. Nice to meet you.
Highly educational.
Thank you.
Gary, it was great to meet you too.
Pleasure. I'd be happy to assist.
And I welcome you both to our Global New York event, which is June 28. More about that later. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.